Happy Sunday to everybody. It's Sunday morning, West Coast time, and little after the afternoon here, East Coast, with my guest. Um, this is What's Next Beyond Service. This is our 25th episode. It's hard to believe that we're at 25 already. Today is a special edition because it is on a Sunday. Normally, my all of my programs are Thursday at at 11 o'clock Pacific, 2 o'clock Eastern. And I bring in folks who served in the military, and we talk about transitioning from service. I also speak with law enforcement officers who have that same transition from service. At some point, we all leave what we do and venture back into the civilian world. So, that's the gist of my show. But again, today, being a Sunday, our guest is Michael Klemmer. Now, Michael Klemmer spent almost 21 years in the Army, an Army officer, and retired. And I interviewed him back in November. So we had interview one a number of months ago. And Michael, as you will see here shortly, he's a very smart guy. He's very structured. He's a good planner. He understands operations and how to execute. And we had a fantastic first interview because we focused on the transition from service, and his in particular was done very well. Some folks kind of stumble through it. Other folks really knock it out of the park with, getting everything in line and then staying to it. Not kind of, I'm just tired of interviews, or I'm tired of this. He was very structured, and it was a great interview. So we didn't really have time to talk about what he's doing in his capacity as CEO for Aerial Resupply Coffee, and that's why he's here today for episode 25, round 2. With that, Mike, welcome back.
Hey, I really appreciate it, Scott. If you had told me I was going to be on episode number 25, I think I would have dressed up a little bit more. But no, this is awesome. Congratulations to you and the team for having this many episodes. And every time I see you guys do one of these, I learn a little bit more about some of the things that I missed in my transition, because it's just so much out there that if you're not really being proactive, you just miss.
Right. And that's the purpose for doing this, right? Because we're all different. We have different backgrounds. Some folks were officers, some folks enlisted,
right?
Different MOSs, and so there's always some nugget I hope that folks take away from interviews like that. And so, yeah, and hey, you've got the killer garb on there.
I'm trying.
Yeah.
No, yeah. So like this is my one-off hat. Like, but at some point, this will become available. For now, it's a solo venture. I had to do it for myself because
sure.
Like, I think my wife jokes with me because I always wear a baseball hat everywhere. I think I've grown up with it since I was a kid. So it's just something that I'm used to. And, the military requires us to wear headgear everywhere. So it's you're just kind of used to doing it, but.
Yeah. Well, I like it. I like the color too, man. It looks cool. And hey, could you stand up just a bit so we can see your shirt?
Oh yeah.
See, yeah, because I see your logo in the corner, but
yeah,
nice. Very cool.
Can't go wrong with this. So awesome shirts.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's nice to have apparel to go along with, what you're doing nowadays. I mean, that's, kind of the thing to do. And so that's cool that you're clicking along there. So
yeah, everything's going real well.
Yeah. Hey, this is a non-related question. I was going to ask you while we were chatting before we, hit record today, but the scenery, the mountain scenery, where is that picture?
Well, so this picture that I have in my Zoom virtual background here, this is related to kind of the location from where my coffee comes from in Colombia. And so there's a farm that I've kind of built a relationship with, and I had them take a picture kind of out their back door. And so I was able to kind of use this as a promotional thing, but also just kind of to get a sense of where the origin of some of my coffee beans are coming from. So I really liked this one and felt it was appropriate. And, being here in Virginia, this is, it's not as green as this right now because of the winter,
right.
But it's also,
sure.
it's a lot of hills, a lot of mountains, in the Shenandoah Valley. So it also reminds me of being, central Virginia.
Yeah, I bet. Well, man, I'm so glad I asked that question. That is cool. I mean,
Yeah.
that's beautiful. I mean, looking at that, reminds me a little bit of Ireland. My daughter and I went there back in 2017 and just fell in love with Ireland. It's just beautiful. But no, that's a great story there. And where you live up in Virginia. I'm from Virginia originally. Grew up in Virginia, and yeah, that the whole Shenandoah area is just beautiful all year
Right.
long. And when the leaves change that time of the year in the fall, man, that's gorgeous too. So yeah, you're in God's country, man. So that's that's
Love
nice.
Virginia, man.
Well, Mike, let's do this. I did mention, that you served in the military, so that's always a great thing. And I'm sure what you learned in the military has probably helped you in a number of ways with making your company work.
Sure.
How to make things work operationally and supply chain. All those things that are important. So when we talked last, again, we were heavy in transition. As far as what you're doing now, when did that kind of, percolate, pun intended, in the back of your mind of, what, an entrepreneur would be something that I'd love to do in coffee in particular? Has this been something that's been brewing, in the
So to
background
speak.
here? Yeah. Or, is this something that you woke up one morning and said, what, this is what I want to do? What's your why and how did that come about?
Well, so that's a great question. It's actually a couple different questions that you asked in there that I'll try to
Sure.
go through.
Yeah.
So when I left the military, I left, you know, as a field grade officer, you leave your, some of these high pressure jobs that, I chose to do my last 2 years of my career. And so when I left, I went from working really hard into into my first job that was much more structured from an 8 to 5 perspective, and that's not to say that the job I have now, even is not hard work, but it's not like being like an operations officer in the Army.
Right.
Okay. And so what I realized is that I have a very high motor. And so I found myself wanting to do something to fill my time that before I just, my time was filled thanks to Uncle Sam. But now it was, what do I want to do? And, that's one of the questions that came as part of my transition that continually was asked of me, which is, what does Mike want to do? And I, didn't really have a plan on starting my own business or my own venture until two things happened. So I was doing a couple meetings with some people, and it kind of clicked because the topic was, we need to get in front of others to have a cup of coffee with them for introductions. And I said, and I really, for some reason, that just kind of stuck with me. And I went home that night and I really started thinking about how everything I ever did for networking during my transition, everything I ever did for meeting people for informational interviews, or even for regular interviews as part of leaving the Army. And even when I was in the Army, everything revolved around coffee. Like all of it was, hey, you're meeting somebody for the first time. Let's grab a cup of coffee. Let's have a conversation. And so, I started thinking to myself, well, I mean, coffee's in my life all the time. I love coffee. Like, this is something that I would like to do. And what really sparked it was when I started looking at what was out there for veteran-owned coffee companies. And the big dog in the room is obviously Black Rifle. But from a support side, like it's very much, everything is, in my opinion, it's all themed very similar. It's a lot of it is not towards what my group or what I grew up with, which was being a logistician, being a logistics officer, being in the support world, and everything that's associated with that. And so that's what I wanted to do. And so I said to myself, well, I can do that. Like, I was a logistician. I love coffee. The service, really kind of showed that while we are critical to the mission, there's a perception in the military that we are, so I don't want to say subservient to the infantry and armor and the cavalry of the world, but we are there to support them. And that's not, and anybody who served knows that's not true, but that's the joke. But it's also, how do we recognize the people that do all of those support functions? And so I felt, what better way to do that than to start my own brand and start actually recognizing those people within a brand that speaks to them.
Wow, that's really cool. And because the aerial resupply, if you're a civilian, you might, not completely understand, what that is, and how it's done in the military. But yeah, I think you're right. When you look at, and the Marine Corps is the same way, right? You have your aviators, and you have your infantry ground pounder guys, and all the associated MOSs with ground combat.
Right.
And then you have the combat service support guys. I was one of those guys. I was a logistician as well. And yeah, it's interesting, some guys get that in terms of, the relationship that you should have, where you're coming across the bridge and shaking the hands at the midpoint, or sometimes you got to come all the way across and educate them on logistics,
Right.
yeah, it's interesting dynamics there, military wise. But so now, was this, so this was, if just for my brain here to understand timeline wise, so you had already transitioned from the
That's right.
military, and you were in your current capacity, and some conditioning in terms of words and phrases on how they want you to do something resonates with you, and you're like, wow, what, all of this kind of comes together, your love for coffee, your service to country, and then having additional time, and you want to be assertive with your time. And what better way than to do something like what you're doing, starting a business. So that's a great way to to understand what was happening, because some folks, I think some folks get out and they're not sure what they want to do, and they kind of, again, stumble into things. And sometimes folks put a lot of time and money into things, and they don't work out, and then what do you do? And it's um, I don't want to be negative here, so I probably probably won't go down
Well, let me jump
that
in
road.
here.
But it's a big decision, right? There's a lot to consider when you are an entrepreneur.
Well, let me jump in here on that, because what you said is important. So, like, when I left the service, one of the things that I realized was that I wanted to still be a part of a community of veterans in some capacity. And here in the Charlottesville area, there's a tremendous opportunity for veterans to get together because of the National Ground Intelligence Center. There's the U.S. Army JAG School. There is the University of Virginia ROTC program. And so when I reached out to a lot of the veterans, both from the VFW, the American Legion, just trying to understand what was in and around the area, I was really kind of disappointed that there really wasn't much. And I thought that there would be a better, more robust community here that I just didn't see. And so, part of Aerial Resupply is also building a community locally here and trying to start something that, quite honestly, I feel like should already exist, but it doesn't. And, that's not to say that some of the things that I talked about aren't happening. It's just, it's not readily accessible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, hey, just kind of a side note thing. You'd mentioned that the JAG school, is that associated with UVA? Is that
Yeah, so the University of Virginia is
yeah.
the host for the U.S. Army JAG School. So all the lawyers, and I think, and if I'm not mistaken, I think it's all services come through the U.S. Army JAG School.
Yeah, at some point in my career, I never really paid attention to that career field in the military, but I remember at some point someone I knew who was a JAG um, had gone back to UVA for something to do with a follow-on course. But
Right.
yeah, I didn't know that. That's cool. That's a
Yeah.
great school. I've got a couple friends that went there. Excellent school,
Yeah.
obviously.
Wahoo wah.
That's right.
Go Who's.
Well, yeah. Well, so let's kind of get into you made the decision,
Yeah.
and what were some of the key factors that when you looked at what you wanted to do, and the kind of the calculus as to how you got into it, and do you have what's some advice for folks that are want to become entrepreneurs and startups? Do you have any
So
startup advice?
there's a lot of ways to skin this cat, right? There's a lot of ways for people to start their own business,
Sure.
from anywhere from going to, SCORE to your local small business developmental center. The VA has programs. Boots to Business, I think, is one of them. There's like all these different programs that exist out there to help veterans transition into the business world. And I'm going to be honest, I didn't do any of that. Like, that's
Mhm.
not what I chose to do. I
Right.
chose to figure and honestly, I chose to figure it out and to start doing my research on how to structure a business. And when I left the service and I got my first job, in addition to being employed, it was also an education on the corporate world and an education as to how businesses run. So from the inside, I got to see how businesses run and how a company fully functions, and what the necessary steps are. And so, I got really, I would say, on the job training on how to operate a business, but not start one. And
Mhm.
so, I looked at, what were the requirements. I asked some friends of mine who were, in small business what they recommended. And I really pared it down to, what do I really need versus what do I want, right? Because I didn't have to start, you don't have to provide a lot of capital up front unless that's what you're going to do. And I needed to figure out like what my path to market was going to be on how I was going to sell my coffee and extend my brand and what I was going to do. Because, lots of people have put millions of dollars towards business and lost that money because they didn't know what they were doing. But, and so I took a very cautious approach, let's put it that way. And so, like, from an advice perspective, I would say maybe mine's not the best way to do it, but there is value in trial and error and failing fast and really, saying, okay, I'm going to do this. It didn't work, or I'm going to get to a certain point and then I need help. And then I'm going to pay somebody a consultant fee to get me to the next step so I can move on and keep moving forward.
Right. And, obviously on LinkedIn, I follow what you're doing.
Yeah.
And I followed you obviously before you did this, but uh, your journey is so interesting, and there is a lot of value to that. And what you just said, I know you've talked to that to some degree about failing fast, and about, hey, yeah, you're going to make mistakes, but that's okay. It's a learning process. And so sometimes the mistake you made because you made it early is invaluable, right?
Right.
Because that's sometimes you make mistakes at a very fatal point. And the failing fast thing, and kind of having that head on the swivel so you can quickly assess, okay, yeah, I need to do something different than that. And being, wise enough to realize, hey, I need help. And then finding, that guy or gal that can consult in that manner, and bring you through that, or, take you to that next level is a big deal. Because I think some folks want to do things themselves, and they want to do everything themselves, and that's cool too. I mean, if you can do that and make it, that's great. But I think it's smart that you realize that, hey, maybe I do need some assistance here, because someone else does this and they probably do it very well. So you can save time, energy, and money, in the long run by doing that. Because maybe if you wouldn't bring that person in, you're not going to get to that next point of moving
Right.
forward in your business, right? And so you can flounder, and that's kind of what I was alluding to up front, where I said, yeah, I don't want to get don't want to get negative, but yeah, it's hard. Starting a business is absolutely not an easy thing. I did it with two nonprofits, and it's day on, stay on, and you're rolling up your sleeves, and you're doing all kinds of stuff that okay, you're the director or the CEO, but guess what? You're doing a little bit of everything, and
Oh,
you can't
100%.
you can't be shy with getting your hands dirty. So
Well, and
absolutely.
when I made the decision to start, I said, okay, this is what I'm going to do. And I didn't have a time period in my mind when I was going to launch. I just said, I'm going to get it started. I want to get this going. And from the time I made the decision and applied my first dollar towards Aerial Resupply to the time my website launched on August 15th was about a 30-day time window. And in that 30 days was business insurance, establishing an LLC, buying my website, building my website, fleshing out all the accounting backend stuff, product development, all of these things that somebody says, well, before anybody can look at something and say, that's what I really want, push Apple Pay or whatnot and buy it, and it shows up at their door, is all of that structure that has to exist. That, I'll be honest, for that first 30 days, like that was an extremely hard time period. And when I got to about August 15th, which is when I launched, and I didn't, looking back, you talk about failures, right? Like I didn't do any pre-sales. I didn't tell anybody I was doing anything. I didn't get word out, like all
Mhm.
these things that you read, all these LinkedIn experts and other experts tell you about, like how to launch a business. Like I didn't do any of that. I didn't say I was coming. I just, on the 15th of August, I said, well, it's now or never. And I just pushed go. And I told the world that I existed. And I said, let the chips fall where they may. And this is my starting point. And I'm going to start from here and build forward. And the first couple days, it was, friends of mine buying from me going, hey, your website's broken. Like you need to fix this link. Hey, this is not
Mhm.
working. Like where did but that's okay, right?
Right.
Because it's somewhat expected. I mean, I'm not Target, I'm not Walmart, I'm not this massive complex. I left the DoD, so I don't have that support. So it's all on me. But the people who saw what I was doing, who also believed in what I was doing, were very um, understanding that
Right.
that I was doing it by myself. And I made a decision at the very beginning of this to be transparent with my journey. I said, hey, I want to share. And I think the phrase that people use is build in public. Like I don't have any problem doing that, because like honestly, it's been probably the best thing I've ever done
Mhm.
with this business, because people are able to see what I'm doing. When I run into a problem, I don't hide it. Like hey, this is my failure. This is what I learned today. And then a lot of people will come in and be like, well, have you thought about this? And point me in a resource direction, or, give me advice or show me something that I didn't know. And so like, it's almost like a MBA degree out in public, right? And that's not to diminish what MBAs actually do, because it's not,
No,
right?
I
I mean,
get it. Yeah.
but I mean, it's definitely like, it's almost like crowdsourcing a business within the veteran community, which is awesome, because the amount of ideas I have from people who are like, well, have you thought about this? Like I could write a book just on those ideas. It's actually really incredible, the support that I've received. And so, but you have to pull the trigger. And so that's what I
Right.
chose to do. It was just, let's go. And, a lot of hard work up to that, and foot on the gas ever since.
Right. And Michael, is LinkedIn. You do a lot of that on LinkedIn, or are you? I think I may have seen you quote or provide something that you did on Twitter and you posted on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Am I getting that right? Yeah. So you're
So
in the Twitter space and
so you can't do it all, right? Like I can't
right.
be everywhere. And I mean, if I could, I think a lot of people would like to carbon copy how I do things. So it's not, it's
Mhm.
hard, right? Like you pick the ones that matter to you. And LinkedIn matters to me a lot because of where I came from. Twitter is also some place that I've worked on, but I'm trying to be everywhere, but that doesn't work, right? So,
Mhm.
for me, predominantly it's LinkedIn. And then I'm experimenting with my presence on Twitter, with my presence on Instagram, and even my presence on TikTok, because that's the new, that is
Right.
another resource that really is getting a lot of traction.
Yeah, and I think you have to do that in today's environment, right? The social media, there's obviously there's downsides to social media, but for what you're doing and getting your word out, your presence out in the marketplace, learning swiftly and smartly how to leverage those tools. I mean, that's it's a big deal, and you only have so much time too, right? We're talking about that, so you got to figure out, okay, how much time do I have in the day, and what's going to give me the most bang for my buck as I'm trying to do certain things,
Sure.
and where does social media come into play with that? And you talking about LinkedIn, I know you do too. I love LinkedIn. LinkedIn community, the folks I've connected with. I've got some fantastic. You're absolutely a connection of mine, and you're a great example. I've got fantastic connections that I know that if something, even if something personal happened in my life, there's folks that I could reach out to and say, hey, do you have a
100%.
minute? Yeah,
Absolutely.
and so you have that, but then you have this wealth of knowledge, like you just talked to, because again, we talked about people having different MOSs in the military, then they get out and do things completely different from what they were doing. They're learning too. They know somebody that can assist, and so leveraging those relationships, that's part of what LinkedIn's all about, right? Is
Of
the
course.
networking, and then being able to uh, work with folks in areas where they're really good at, and
Right.
I can see that the folks you talked about in the initially who were coming to um, you know were coming in your first couple of days and weeks and ordering for you, then had those comments back. They were critical in the sense of critical, to help, right?
Absolutely.
Not like, hey man, this sucks. What the hell's going on? It's like, oh hey, by the way, because they want to help you, right?
Absolutely.
And I guarantee you, all those folks had such grace too, and how they probably came about it, and the fact that they wanted to help, because in this world there are so many people that are willing to throw a rock and criticize. Well, what are you doing? This doesn't work. How that's no way to run a business. It's
Right.
like,
Right.
and you get folks like that. Obviously, you see it a lot in the retail space. But at any rate, no, that's good. I'm so glad to see that you're leveraging social media, and particularly LinkedIn, because I've been following you. I know there's a lot of folks that are following your success, and the fact that you're so open with it as you are, you know, other folks are learning too, right? Because this isn't just about coffee. This is about a startup, and
Well, right.
there are things that happen in any business that are the same or very similar, process wise. And, it's really cool to see this unfolding. And the way you just explained it about it kind of being like an MBA in the or
Yeah.
yeah, Masters of Business in the open space really makes a lot of sense. I think that's a cool way to look at it.
Well,
Absolutely.
I mean, I'm just, I am not, nor will I ever be the smartest person. And I know that. And,
Mhm.
my favorite phrase when I talk to new people is, I don't know what I don't know. And I am very open to people telling me the reality of situations, because, I want to grow my company. I want it to become, a fixture of employment here in Charlottesville. I'm not there yet, but that's what I want, right? Like I want my company to be a major veteran employer in Central Virginia. To do that, though, I need people to be, and people have been, brutally honest with me in a very polite way, but in a positive, constructive way, not like, not in a not mean, or in an attempt to tear
Sure.
me down. That only comes from having honest conversations and being open about what's going on. And I
Mhm.
choose to do that, on social media, and take and because of that, like I feel like I've gotten a lot of people's best advice back to me, that's helped me more than I could have ever hoped for.
Wow. That's a heck of a testimonial right there. And it really is. You know, you're living it in the open, and sharing. I think is, it's obviously it has advantages for you, but it also says a lot about who you are too. That you're not doing this. You're not bringing your stuff in as no, you can't see this. It's like,
Well, right.
because there are some folks that are very protective over certain things. And I mean, I get some of that. Yeah, is your internal stuff that maybe you're not wanting to share, or you're not willing to share yet, or what, but that's fine. But you're smart in determining what it is you want to put out there, and again, the why behind it. I think that's brilliant.
Right.
So maybe you are the smartest guy in the room.
No, I'm not.
Well, at least in this virtual room, you probably are.
Well, I don't know about that. I think we're both pretty smart.
Well,
I have a question, if I may.
Oh yeah, sure. Go ahead, Paul.
What is it that you need now in the way of help or ideas or thoughts or provocation to do something that you might be not wanting to do? Is there anything that I could do to help you? And I ask that because I've been through that rodeo a number of times, all of them rather successfully. And I've come up with some theories about how to do things that are based on the pain of experience. And so I offer for whatever it's worth.
Well,
hey, Michael, before you answer that question, hey, Paul, welcome aboard. I didn't even notice that you would come into the interview, so I'll take back what I said about you're probably the smartest guy in this room of three.
I doubt that.
No, Paul's
it's not a contest, Scott. It's not a contest. It's a sharing. And some guys know some things, and other guys know other things.
Yeah, amen to that.
That's all it is.
Well, to answer your question, Paul, I think for right now, my biggest thing is still brand expansion and just brand awareness from everybody, right? And I'm just trying to really get my name out there. And some of the, Scott and I, we're going to talk about some of the initiatives that I'm doing, but one of them that I've really kind of focused on is initiating my own brand ambassador program, and trying to because a lot of people have wanted to help me. It's been a natural extension of what Aerial Resupply is. And so, I've had many people reach out and taken the mantle of trying to get my name out there. So I would just say, that's really my biggest thing right now. And, from a, so it's like, it's a double-edged sword too, right? Because on one hand, I really want to grow, but on the other hand, I want to make sure that my entire infrastructure is prepared for whatever growth I go through. And as a one-man person, as a one-man show, that's not something that, there are some things I can outsource and there are some things that I can do, and I do very well. But we all know there comes a point where to really expand, you need people to help, and you need that foundation. And that's what I'm still building. So I don't want to grow too fast, but I do want to make sure that my name continues to move forward, and my cause and what my brand stands for.
That's spoken like a true logistician.
Well, yeah, I mean, right. Well, distribution is king. I mean, that's the key, right? Like, especially with logistics. I mean, you and I both know that, Scott. It's like, if you cannot distribute what you're doing, regardless of what it is, could be coffee, can be software, can be an app, it doesn't matter. The product is irrelevant. If you cannot distribute it, it's not going to work. And so for me, that's one of the things that, I'm still working through is distribution. Because like right now I'm direct to customer. I use the post office and FedEx and UPS very well. And that's a method. It's not always the best, but it's a method. It's what I have available to me now. And in future, but that's current state. My desired state is much different, but I need the structure behind it to make it work.
Right.
Let me ask a couple of questions. Number one, when you send out a package of your product, do you send out anything else with it?
So right now, my coffee goes essentially by itself. It's shipped, it's prepackaged and then shipped. And then when I do ship merchandise, I will usually include a couple of trinkets here and there on what I ship with it.
I ask because it is a great way to begin the process of referrals.
Right.
And one of the things that I would suggest to you is putting a couple of business cards in each package that you ship and asking people to share those with their friends. And on the back of the card, it would say something along the line of, "We really appreciate referrals. Thank you for your business."
That's awesome.
And those simple little inexpensive messages can make a huge difference.
Right.
And I understand the value of social media and all the rest of that. By the way, I've done computer forensics for quite some time, so I'm fairly comfortable with technology. But the point is that you've hit on two things: brand ambassadors, brand awareness, and distribution. And so I'm looking at inexpensive ways to magnify your efforts.
Okay.
And so I would offer that as a simple suggestion. When you feel like you're ready for it, you may want to stick a little 3-fold brochure in with each, but it doesn't have to start there.
Sure.
And on your business card, you indicate the means to contact you and the social media that you're on or that you want to be sought after in that particular. And I wouldn't try to do them all because that'll make you nuts quickly. And so just one or two. LinkedIn is very good, and there are others as well, but start with one and then expand it. And
that's a great suggestion.
Expand it as you have the time or as you have the assistance available to you to do that effectively. There's nothing worse than having you be mentioned on a particular social media site and then having no response to anybody who contacts you there because you don't have the time.
Right.
And people view that as being ignored, and most of us aren't happy about that.
Well, that's a very good
point. But the other thing I do, and I encourage other people to do, is build a small fire. Sit close to the fire, and as the fire grows, expand out. And the value of that is that you stay focused on what it takes to get you off the ground. And once you are off the ground, the fire will begin to grow and you can expand out to other areas because you will be able to afford the kind of help, whether it's contract help or whether it's employees. And I really appreciate the fact that you want to have veteran employees. And I would offer that you consider having perhaps veterans who are able to do the things that they need to do. Right. And I'll give you an example of that. I did some consulting work for a software company years ago. And one of the things that I figured out is they had this whole floor of tech support people, and all they did was sit in their chairs all day and answer the phone and answer people's questions. So I said to the owner of the company, why don't you
Paul, I think you froze up there. Mike, can you hear Paul?
Would appreciate the opportunity that presents to them. And within a year, that room was populated with people in wheelchairs or with prosthetics who couldn't get around very well,
Right.
but they could sit and do their job. And to a man and woman, every one of them appreciated it.
That's awesome.
And so just thoughts for whatever they're worth, and that comes out of learning the hard way.
Well, I appreciate that, Paul. That's all of your suggestions are awesome, and I have all that now, so that I can move forward. I had not thought of that, and I appreciate that tremendously.
Sure, and I'm happy to help if I can. I am happy to do whatever I can to see you succeed. And one of the things that I would ask of you is, do you have a specific goal for the level of expansion that you're looking for? And what are the limits of it? And if you don't know the answer, I don't need to know it. I just need you to think about it.
Oh, no, that's why I roll that question in my mind. I don't think I'm prepared to answer that question right now, Paul, but I do know that, I think I have a vision beyond just owning a simple coffee shop on the corner. I think it's much bigger than that, but I said, I need some real time to kind of craft that, to be able to discuss it.
Sure. And when you do, let me suggest to you that it be an incremental effort. In other words, don't start by wanting to ship coffee to the North Pole.
Well, right.
Okay. Go where the people are who appreciate your product and will use it and will share it with others.
Right.
Okay.
Well, Paul, that was very informative. And, I could see the wheels, turning in Mike's head as you were, talking about some of the things you were talking about, especially, putting the business card in there with the comment on the back about referrals and, just growing from that perspective, the whole marketing involved with that. That's very smart. And yeah, thanks. You always have such value to add to our conversations, when you are wanting to share your wisdom and experience with folks. So we absolutely appreciate that, Paul. So
thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So Michael, as far as the brand ambassadors, let's take a little bit of time now and chat about that, because I think that's a cool concept. And for folks that might not understand, what that means, can you, tell us, hey, this is what a brand ambassador is, and, tell us what you're doing with that.
Yeah. So, so as part of learning, right, and as part of understanding kind of the way businesses operate, especially in an e-commerce world, and operate, and how messages, how brand awareness becomes a thing, I've learned about what makes a brand ambassador. And really, for me, there's brand ambassador, brand enthusiast, somebody who just likes coffee. Like, it all kind of works together, right? But like, when people really buy into what I'm doing, then I feel like they're more of an ambassador to be able to articulate the values of what my company is and what I stand for, which is, supporting those who support others. I'm, really very supportive of, veterans, law enforcement, firefighters, paramedics, first responders. But I take it a step further. I take it down to the people who make things work, right? Because there are a lot of people in this world who get recognized for the efforts of a team. The people who, you could even argue with the Super Bowl, the 53 people that are about to be on, 106 people who are about to be on the field for the Super Bowl in a week, all got there because of the efforts of a massive complex to get those players ready to go, right? That's my audience. Sure, those 106 players all deserve the recognition, but there are people whose names will never be mentioned, that quite honestly usually roll in the credits after the movie when we all stand up and walk away. But those are the people that I'm supporting. Those are the people that I want to make sure get recognized, because that's where the rubber meets the road. And so from a brand ambassador perspective, a lot of the people who are proponents of what I'm doing fall in that category, and they want to be able to see this brand succeed because it is speaking to a different audience. It's still speaking to veterans, but it's also speaking to military spouses. It's speaking to the support community, and it's speaking to the people who put in a hard day's work, who just, they never get recognized because it's, not considered, sexy, or it's not considered,
Right.
the something that should be visible. It's just supposed to happen. That's fine,
So,
but it needs to be more than that.
right. And so, what do you per se have these folks do? Have you given them, your guidance on, what you believe
Oh
they should be
yeah.
doing as brand ambassadors? Are they bringing new ideas? And, what are some of the examples of things that they're doing as brand ambassadors?
Yeah, so they're sharing, like you said, they're sharing my values. They're, really sharing what I kind of, in the referral perspective of like what Paul talked about. It's more of a
Mhm.
verbal referral system than sharing my, like a business card, which I think is a great idea. I'm going to do that, Paul. And I
Mhm.
think that, it's going to be, and really it's about just trying to do word of mouth, because one of the things that, I've tried Facebook ads, I've tried Instagram ads, I've tried ads. I would much rather grow organically and grow through, like, for you, Scott, if you were to go to your friends and be like, hey man, this is the coffee that you need to be drinking, and they start drinking it and they like it, and then they tell two
Right.
people, like, that's really the growth that I think I want to see my brand do. And that's what the brand ambassadors are doing for me.
Right. Oh, that's great. That's again, I think that's another smart approach because you know, part of that is leveraging social media too. For the brand ambassadors, I would imagine on top of whatever their network is, and that's how we're doing it nowadays, right?
Right.
We're communicating with so many people across the country and even worldwide. So no, that's a cool approach. And now something I want to ask you about, and this is it was kind of big news. It sounded super sexy, and obviously it's I think a great thing. You announced on LinkedIn not too long ago that you are in a partnership with Vet to Industry. So what can you share
That's
with
right.
us about that? Because that seems like a really cool thing.
It is a really cool thing, right? Like, so when you talk about like my transition of the Army, it was what programs exist to be able to transition out. And one of the bigger programs out there that, that exists is Vets to Industry. And it's really a giant networking platform that Brian Arrington and the team have put together to be able to bring vets with recruiters to help those people, help vets transition into the industry, right? And I could not be happier than to be aligned with them, because it supports really where I want to go, right? Which is, I want to be a fixture of veteran employment. Well, what better way to do that down the road than to be partnered with a nonprofit that does exactly that mission? And
Right.
so, like, we had our first mixer yesterday. It was, Leslie Coffee and the team put it together with Brian. And so I think there's 130 people that attended that event on a Saturday, which was tremendous. And
Wow.
just being able to be associated with a first-class organization like Vets to Industry is I'm one person, there are many, and it's awesome.
Sure.
So I think it's great.
No, absolutely. There's just some
Can I make a
complementary.
suggestion to you?
Absolutely.
When you have brand ambassadors, how do you go about selecting them?
So really it becomes a conversation between me and whoever the individual is that decides that they want to be a brand ambassador. If it's somebody I know really well, then that conversation is a little bit different than somebody who I might not know.
Sure.
And so it's really about kind of a back and forth communication, and then, deciding whether or not the fit is there. But in any event, if somebody really is interested in what I'm doing, if those individuals are willing to continue to kind of take the mantle and at least talk positively about what my company is doing, then that's still word of mouth as part of a brand ambassadorship.
Can I make a suggestion to you?
Absolutely.
If you identify each of the audiences, and you've mentioned some of them already: law enforcement, first responders, veterans, military, so on and so forth, and spouses. if you pick a brand ambassador for each of those audiences, that will be somebody who is familiar to that audience by dint of their commonality.
Sure.
In other words, if you pick a spouse for military officers, for instance,
Right.
that's somebody who is probably known in those circles and can address their issues specifically from experience. And the same thing goes with law enforcement. And what you'll find there is there are a lot of law enforcement people, one of them, who have military experience as a common thread.
Right.
And so there's a little bit of crossover there, but do you know any cops that don't drink coffee?
Not very many.
on the midnight shift, for instance?
That's right.
The point is that if you pick somebody in law enforcement, you can pick one for each agency. And then what you do is you provide them with a coffee cup. And the reason you do that is because in every police station and every sheriff's department in the country, there is a lounge. And in that lounge is a place where people hang their coffee cups.
Right.
And guess what? All the rest of the cops are going to see on all three shifts, whether that guy's there or not.
That's true.
It's their coffee mug.
That's right.
Okay. And on your coffee mug, you want to put some single means of contact, whether that's your website where people can place orders, or whether it's a phone number. And I wouldn't recommend phone numbers because you're going to get inundated.
Right.
Or whatever it is, perhaps the name of the officer that that cup belongs to. Because guess what will happen? The rest of them will see that, and some of them will go and ask.
That's a good
And
point.
if that isn't a great way to open a conversation, I don't know what is.
No, I agree with you. That's awesome.
And then you can do the same thing in the fire departments, the same thing in the emergency rooms, and the same thing in the veterans organizations, whether it's the VFW or the Legion or the DAV, whatever it is.
Yeah, and Paul, with those organizations, that really resonates because, you know, a lot of those guys harken back their time in the military, like say the Chief's Mess, for instance. You go into a Chief's Mess, what do you see on the wall? All the coffee cups are up there, you know, hanging, and they know whose cup's whose, right?
Same for the warrants.
That's pretty cool.
You know?
Yeah. Right.
No, absolutely. No, that's really cool. That's you know, I tell you, that's, I know that Michael's, you know, smartly, you know, annotating these words of advice.
Oh yeah.
To roll into, you know, his operation here, and so kind of getting back to.
Well, I'm not saying you have to do all these things all at the same time. I'm suggesting you start with a small fire.
No, absolutely.
But you know, there again, doing a few of these things, and perhaps baseball hats, and you know, that'll come as time allows you to. But the point is, don't spend a lot of money on the front end that you will need to make product and ship it on the back end, because if you get an order and can't ship it, then you're really in trouble.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You know.
Yeah, when you kind of out underpacing your demand.
Yeah.
Right.
So, well, hey, just in an effort to, you know, to push through, and I've got a couple more things I want to cover with you here, you know, before we wrap up. We're a little more than an hour now. How are you on time, by the way?
A little bit longer. So maybe we do two more.
Okay. Okay.
And then
cool.
we'll yeah.
Sure. Okay. So, so we just talked about, you know, your partnership with Best in Industry. That's awesome. That's a great direction for you. Now, you've talked on LinkedIn about your decision to use military spouses in your supply base.
That's right.
Yeah. Share what that, some folks might not understand what a mil spouse is, but a military spouse is, someone married to a guy or gal in the service,
Yep.
and they have a unique position within the military because they do so many things that folks have no concept of, behind the scenes supporting, their loved one that's in the military.
Right.
And their background probably was what made you think, hey, this is a great market to tap into for what it is you want to do. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. So, as a supply chain professional, one of the things that I do is vet suppliers. And one of the things I do is look for different avenues. And as part of the diversity and supplier initiatives for a lot of different companies, I looked very heavily at, well, if I'm going to talk the talk about supporting military spouses, what better way than to buy from military spouses as well, right? And so we talk about Buy American, we talk about buy within, well, really Buy American is like the biggest one, right? But it's about continuing to support the community in whatever way. So not only am I, really advocating for, support of military spouses, but I'm also including them as part of my supplier base. And so, one of the things that I think we all know is that there are some tremendously talented people out there who happen to be associated with the military. They're not serving, but they're the spouse of a service member. That doesn't mean that they're incapable of doing any of these types of businesses. In fact, they run some very successful ones, and
Right.
they're just not as well known. But it's one of the things that I want to do is and what I've decided is to make is to really help be almost like the anchor and to grow with people, have my supplier base grow with me, right? It's not, could I go to a national industrial supplier on certain things? I absolutely could. Is it gonna matter to them? No. Is it gonna matter to somebody who's starting their own business as well, who can do what I'm looking for them to do? And as I grow, they grow. Yeah, that matters. That's bigger to me and more important to me than going to a Fortune 500 company and giving them my money, because whether I give it to them or not, it's not going to change what they do. But it could absolutely affect how somebody else operates if I start really growing and I'm able to provide more business, because now it's about veterans helping veterans, which is what I'm always going to do.
Right. Yeah, that's tremendous. And I've had the good fortune of interviewing 3 military spouses on this program. So of the 25 episodes, 3 were dedicated to
Yeah.
And they happen to be, well, actually, let me say that 4, because one, Dan Horgan with Black Rifle.
That's right.
Yeah, his wife continued to serve, I think, in the Air Force after he got out, and so there
That's
was a
right.
period of time where that role kind of reversed, and so I've had 4, 3 gals and 1 guy, but yeah, a tremendous resource, absolutely undervalued by some because they don't know any better, but
Right.
then certainly the capacity that these folks have is tremendous, and so I think that's a great way to connect on that side of the military equation where a lot
Right.
of folks probably just didn't even think about. That's again brilliant. So cool. Well, and then let's talk about just a couple more things we'll squeeze in here, because I know you probably have other plans on a Sunday here. So um, you are taking a trip out to that island somewhere out in the Pacific. That's a beautiful place. You're going to Hawaii, to Schofield Barracks there. Uh, what's going
So
on with that?
actually, I'm not, my company is.
Right,
So
right.
I am now a vendor at the Armed Forces Exchange on Schofield and Hickam Air Force Base in Hawaii. And part of my plan and part of what I do is, this is also a pilot initiative that I'm doing to employ military spouses and help them learn entrepreneurial ventures as they help run kiosks for me. So because I'm tied into the military spouse community, it's twofold. And so what I have is, I have an amazing person out there who's actually going to be running the kiosk for me, and she's going to run some tastings, and we're going to do it on February 14th, which is Valentine's Day, right in the middle of the Armed Forces Exchange right there in Schofield. So, 10:30 to 2:30 Hawaiian time. So aloha to everybody, but 25th ID, if you're listening, you better show up. No, I'm just kidding. But like, seriously, I think it'll be great, right? Like, and you know what, the important thing to me is that it's a step, right? It's a step in the right direction. And, when 6 months ago, if you were to say to me, hey, Mike, are you going to be in the exchange in Hawaii? I would have been like, I don't even know how to do that. And here I am,
Right.
6 months later, having, had many different types of avenues just to get to this moment. And so, it's kind of cool. So we'll see what it looks like on the 14th. I hope it turns out really well. I'm sure it will turn out really well, but we'll see.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's exciting. That's
Mike,
so
I
cool.
have something to share with you about that.
Sure, Paul.
I grew up in a little town called Wahiawa,
Okay.
middle of Oahu, which has on one edge Schofield Barracks and on the other edge Wheeler Air Force Base, which is now Wheeler Army Air Station. I know every base in Hawaii.
Okay.
My mother, until she passed away, played the organ on Saturday at the Navy Chapel at Pearl Harbor for
wow.
weddings and on Sunday for church services until she was 91 years old and took a bad fall, and that was the end of that. But she never would accept pay for it because my dad was a China Marine, and her brother died on Iwo Jima. And my oldest brother got medicaled out because he had cancer of the bone marrow. But the point of all of that is, if you need a reference, my family is well known there. I have a brother living in Honolulu and a sister living on the Big Island, and there are all kinds of bases. And
Sure.
one of the places that I would suggest to you is Pearl Harbor, Pearl Hickam, and the other is the Marine Corps Air Station at Kaneohe, because they're pretty good sized bases, and you'll get a lot of support there. Because I don't think anybody else is doing what you're proposing, and
we're going to see.
Really cool.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. Hey, this is, like I said, this is the pilot initiative. So where this goes, just got to do one, and then we'll see. But I appreciate that, Paul.
Okay.
Yeah, cool. That's wow. Who knew? That's a pretty cool story. And yeah, Paul and I actually, we don't live too far from each other, and I'm on the hook now for maybe a case of coffee time with Paul because I wound up getting sick in January, and because so him and I are going to meet and have a very long talk about all kinds of good stuff, and I'm looking forward to that. But yeah, thanks Paul, I appreciate that. So hey, one last thing. I know we were talking a bit about this before we hit the record, and this will be the last thing, and we'll let you roll on out of here, Mike. You're getting close. You said you're not quite there, but you're envisioning that first W-2 employee. I know that's got to be so exciting, and everything you laid out about who you're looking to bring into your organization and employ. I can imagine, that you may be thinking about that person being someone who had served in the military or not, whatever that comes out to. That's a big first step, and I know it's exciting.
Well, it is. And, like we were talking about before we started recording, like that's still a step away from me, but I am much closer today than I was 6 months ago. And, that's something that I really am looking forward to because, my goal is very much hire veterans, hire military spouses, hire people who are transitioning, ultimately become a skill bridge partner, become all these different partners that, other people, other companies have done to help transitioning veterans. I want to do the same thing. And so, my goal is really, I would say within the next 6 months to have the W-2 employee and have that person available, as part of my organization.
Sure.
That's a goal, right? I mean, that's somewhat lofty, and it's one of those things that I'm still working through. But yeah, I mean, I'm getting much closer than I was when I first started. So it's gonna be
Absolutely.
fun.
Yeah, it's super exciting to again see you grow here, and how you're growing it and how you're out again in the space of
That's
social
right.
media. You're sharing and building, and folks are loving watching what it is you're doing, and the how. Um, so you talked about SkillBridge real quick. I think that's a great idea. If you're able to connect with that, and then what value that will bring to what you're doing, and then it's a win-win, right? Because obviously these folks that would come into that program are going to gain a wealth of knowledge too. So yeah, I wouldn't have thought about that. That's really cool. So you're all over it.
Hey, I'm trying. I'm trying. We'll see. We'll
Yeah,
see. So it's all these things
absolutely.
that were available to me is something I want to be able to provide later on down the road.
Right.
Mike, I've
So I
got
guess
one
the last
one
thing,
last
yeah,
comment.
yeah. If you don't mind,
Um,
Paul, if you don't mind, I
Go
want
ahead.
to finish my thought here. Yeah, thanks. So what I was going to wrap into was the product that you have available, right? You're selling coffee. You've got a couple different lines. Can you just quickly tell us a little bit about each one of those?
Yeah. So, I have the three different blends right now. I'm working on a fourth and a fifth, but we'll stick to the three. So
Mhm.
right now it's, Firewatch, which is my medium roast, single origin coffee from Colombia, which is a really smooth. It's got a little bit of a citrus aftertaste, but it's awesome. I have
Mm.
Spectre, which is my dark roast espresso blend, which if you like black coffee, that's like, if you really like black coffee, that's the choice, right?
Right.
And then my last coffee that I have is called Moab, which is my double caffeinated version. And I'll tell you a quick story. So when I first started figuring out the right brew and how I really wanted it to taste, I hadn't had anything to eat that morning. And so I was really brewing my first cup of it around 11:30 in the morning, had really loved it, had one cup, really felt like I wanted to drink a second one. So I did. About 30 minutes later, my wife calls me. And about 5 minutes into the phone call, she just goes, "What's wrong with you?" And I'm like, what are you talking about? She's like, "You are talking so fast. You are so amped up. Like, what is wrong?" And she's like, and I told her what I was doing. And she's like, "You're not allowed to drink anymore. Like, you can't do it." And I love it, right? I can't. And so like, it's hilarious because like the reception for it has been fantastic. Like, people love it. And I've had a friend of mine who was always drinking energy drinks, but
Mm.
now he drinks one cup of Moab and that's it. He doesn't feel the need to drink the Monsters or the Bangs or the Rippets or whatever you want to call them. He just drinks the
Right.
coffee and that's it. So for him, he's like, "Man, this really helped me because I save money because I'm not buying all
Yeah.
these energy drinks, but at the same time I get to enjoy coffee." So it works out
Well,
both ways.
that's a complete win. And the other thing is, I'm not really a fan of those because I don't think that some of those are probably necessarily good for you.
Well,
Those
right.
energy drinks. Yeah,
Well, there's a lot
go
of
ahead.
studies
Yeah.
out there that coffee is really, really good for you.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
let's go with that.
Right. And right. So that's kind of what I was getting to is like, all those, people, it's all about choice. So people will choose, what they like and what they don't like. But I think, the wiser we become, you want to make sure that you're putting stuff that's, in the long run, not going to be detrimental to to your health. And coffee has consistently shown that it's a healthy drink. There's a lot of benefits to drinking coffee. I love coffee, Mike. Just one last quick story with me. When in 2003, I was with a 15th Marine Expeditionary Unit. We were moving all around the battlefield, and so logistics was a tough thing, right? Because we were moving, and uh, bottom line was at some point when we were in Kuwait, you had coffee, and you go across the line of departure, and you're doing your thing, and the coffee runs out, and the only coffee you have is that little bit of instant coffee that's in your MRE, right? Your meals ready to eat, packaged operational rations, and um, I love coffee, but at some point it was a morning ops intel brief sitting there, with the commander, and my taste bugs kicked in for some reason, and I looked down, and it was just disgusting. It was So I dumped it out, and I didn't have any more coffee until I got back on ship. And so I've always told my wife, I said, I've done with a lot of things in my life. As a Marine, you go to a lot of places, and there's sacrifice involved. But one place I will no longer sacrifice is my coffee consumption,
There you go.
because I love coffee, and I'm gonna, as long as I can control that, I'll be happy. And so with that, I'm gonna. I've been wanting to do this. I'm gonna get off the doggone stick here and order a couple bags of your coffee, because quite frankly, without naming names, the coffee that I've been loyal to for a number of years, something's happened. It's not the same coffee. And I've done a little bit of research. They're not talking about it. And, I guess that's their business. They make decisions on, maybe where they get their beans and all that. But something has absolutely changed. I mean, I know enough about coffee to realize that, the bag's the same, but something inside. So when I get off the phone here, or excuse me, off our interview, I'm going to link up and, get a couple of your bags coming my way. And,
Let's do it.
I think you have a new consumer here.
Appreciate it, Scott.
Absolutely. Well, hey, we're going to wrap this up. Is there any last thing that you want to share with us that you maybe haven't, had the opportunity to do?
Well, two things. First, Paul, thank you for everything that you brought up in this conversation. I really appreciate it. A lot of the things that you've talked about are things that I like I said, I don't know what I don't know. And your wisdom really, I think, is going to be something I implement almost immediately on a lot of how I do some of these products and how I expand my awareness. I think just between me and you, Scott, like, I really appreciate this, just even being able to do this with you and talk about it, because this platform has really helped me. I've had a lot of people who've come to me and say, hey, I saw you here. What did you mean by that? And so that's been also tremendously helpful, and why I continue to choose to work with my friends, which I consider you, Scott, so that, it's one of those things that, I think we're all working together even after service, and it's great.
Absolutely. Very mutual. Michael.
I have
Absolutely.
one more comment to make to you, Mike. In terms of value, every product has a perceived value. And so I heartily recommend that you never, ever discount your product, because the perception of a discount is that it's not quite as valuable as it was thought to be. But instead, you ramp up your marketing to establish that it is worth paying the money. And I don't know what your cost is, or what your sales point is. But once you begin discounting, you turn into a Target or a Kmart instead of a Neiman Marcus.
Right.
And it's not about how much you're selling it for. It's about the perceived value. And the perceived value diminishes when you discount. So there are other ways to compensate for that, and we can talk about that at another time. But one of the things that I would really emphasize to you is marketing in terms of value.
Right.
Because when people see benefits from your material that they don't see elsewhere, some of that is going to catch on. And when it does, it continues to expand business incrementally.
Sure.
And that has a lot of value.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, well, absolutely, Paul. I appreciate your wisdom and advice here. And, it's good to see that, how we do things here in an open forum, where people are comfortable in sharing and are willing to share, and the goodwill that's here and doing this is fantastic. And I think this has been a very informative process today, interview. A lot of knowledge has been exchanged, and absolutely understanding and listening to your story, Mike, is motivational. I love the fact that you served and now you have seen purpose, right? Because it's all about purpose in life, and you're very good at that. And I'm absolutely looking forward to hitting brew in a couple days, and start enjoying the product that you're putting out there for folks. This is exciting stuff. Thanks for your time today on a Sunday.
Absolutely, man.
Yeah, as soon as this records, I'll zip it to you. We'll take a look. Anything you want to modify, we'll make happen, and then we'll get this back out onto YouTube under the Power of Our Story. If there's anything else you want to send me to add to the description part when I
Yeah.
get it posted on YouTube, send that. Your website, any other information that you think is germane to this discussion, and we'll get that out there. But hey, God bless you and your family, Mike, and thanks for what you're doing. And you have a fantastic rest of your day, man.
Appreciate it, Scott. Thank you.
Okay. Hey, you gents, take care.